I had just gotten out of work at 11 p.m. and was heading back to my house. It's about a 45-minute drive to get home usually, as I live several miles outside of the city. It's always very quiet, and the roads are pretty empty once I start to get further out and closer to home. I always enjoyed the drives back from work. I found them peaceful and just a nice way to wind down after a long day. I was 20 minutes away from home, and just turned down a long side road that pretty much leads directly to my house. This was my usual route home that I'd been taking for years now, and I'd never had anything happen before. I will admit though, it was a bit of a creepy road at night. It was very dimly lit, and the sides of the road were surrounded by a dense forest. Not to mention, it would often get foggy during the later hours of the night, making things only visible within a few feet ahead. Again though, barely anyone is on this road at night, and there's no turns or anything, so visibility is never too much of an issue. Though a couple minutes down the road, I see through the fog a small blinking light. I couldn't really tell how far ahead it was or even what side of the road it was on. I slowed down, and as I started to get closer, the light turned off completely. At this point, I was maybe going 15 to 20 miles per hour when out of the fog a small car pulls out from the side of the road and stops directly in front of me. I tried to brake, but I was too close already and my car tapped the back of theirs. I was kind of in shock at first as to how suddenly it all happened, but I noticed neither of our cars really had much damage. Not really knowing what to do, I opened my door and stood beside my car, waiting for them to get out as well. I could see them moving around in the front seat, but I couldn't tell what they were doing. As I stood there, I looked at his car, noticing how old and worn it was and that the headlights were all turned off. Eventually, a man got out of the car slowly and began making his way over to me. From what I could see, he looked like a middle-aged man and was a pretty large guy. I decided to start off and asked, "Is everything okay? You pulled out pretty quick." He was acting a little strange and looking all around and never making eye contact with me. After a couple seconds, he replied. I wasn't really sure how to respond, but he was starting to really make me uncomfortable, and I didn't want to be out on an empty road alone with him. I told him that there was no real damage to their car, so I was going to get back on the road and head home. But as I began reaching for my car door, he told me to wait. He told me he wanted to check his car out for damage before I left. I said okay and stood next to my car as he looked at his back bumper. But then he started to walk around this car, pretending to look at it for damage, which was really weird because I had only tapped his back bumper. As he started to make his way to the passenger side, I saw a large figure get up in the back seat and start moving towards the door. I immediately got in my car and locked it as a man got out of the back door. Both of them began waving their hands at me, telling me to stop. I was panicking at this point, and put the car in drive and went around them down the road. Looking in the rearview mirror, I could see their lights turn on through the fog. I could see their lights for about 30 seconds, but eventually they faded out. I pulled into a gas station that was about 5 minutes from my house and waited there just to make sure that they didn't follow me home. But the car never passed by. After waiting for 15 minutes, I headed home. I decided not to call the cops at the time, as I wasn't entirely sure if I was just overreacting or not. I'm still not sure what those people really wanted, but the more I think about it, everything about that situation felt wrong. I don't know what their plan was, but part of me feels like something very dangerous was about to happen, if I had not gotten out of there in time. Another part of me wishes I had reported the incident, as I find myself wondering, what if they had stopped following me so that they could try and learn? It was a dark and stormy night. I was driving alone on a deserted highway, trying to get home as fast as possible. I had just finished a long and exhausting business trip, and I wanted nothing more than to see my wife and kids again. As I drove, I noticed a figure standing by the side of the road, holding a sign that read, Need a ride? I slowed down and took a closer look. It was a young man, wearing a leather jacket and jeans, with a backpack slung over his shoulder. He looked harmless enough, and I felt sorry for him. I decided to stop and offer him a lift. "Hey, where are you headed?" I asked, rolling down my window. "Anywhere but here, man." "Thanks for stopping," the hitchhiker said, smiling. "No problem. Hop in," I said, unlocking the door. The hitchhiker got in the car and put his backpack on the floor. He buckled his seatbelt and thanked me again. "So, what's your name?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "Jake. And you?" "Sam. Nice to meet you, Jake." "Likewise." I drove on, feeling good about my act of kindness. I asked Jake where he was from, what he did for a living, and why he was hitchhiking. Jake answered vaguely, saying he was just traveling around, looking for adventure. He didn't seem to have a clear destination or purpose in mind. I found Jake's answers odd, but I didn't press him further. I figured Jake had his own reasons for being on the road, and it was none of my business. I changed the topic and talked about my own life, my family, my job, and my hobbies. Jake listened politely, but didn't say much. I noticed that Jake kept glancing at his backpack nervously, as if he was hiding something inside it. I wondered what it could be, but I didn't ask. I respected Jake's privacy, and hoped Jake would do the same for me. We drove for about an hour, until we reached a gas station. I pulled over and said I needed to fill up the tank and use the restroom. I asked Jake if he wanted anything from the store. "No, thanks. I'm good," Jake said. "Okay. I'll be right back," I said. I got out of the car and locked it behind me. I walked to the gas pump and inserted my credit card. As I waited for the authorization, I looked at the store window and saw Jake inside. He was talking to the cashier, pointing at something behind the counter. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw the cashier nod and reach for something. I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. I had a bad feeling about this. I quickly finished pumping gas and ran to the store. As I entered, I saw Jake holding a gun in his hand, aiming it at the cashier's head. "Give me all the money in the register," Jake shouted. "Please don't shoot. I'll give you whatever you want," the cashier pleaded. I was shocked and terrified. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I had picked up a hitchhiker who turned out to be a robber and a killer. I wondered what else Jake had in his backpack. Maybe drugs? Maybe explosives? Maybe human body parts? I didn't know what to do. Should I try to stop Jake? Should I call for help? Should I run away? Before I could make up my mind, Jake noticed me and turned his gun towards me. "Who are you?" Jake asked. I'm Sam," I stammered. "What are you doing here?" Jake asked. I was just getting some gas," I said. "Are you with him?" Jake asked, pointing at the cashier. No, I don't know him," I said. "Then why are you here?" Jake asked. I gave you a ride," I said. Jake looked confused for a moment, then remembered. "Oh yeah, you're the guy who picked me up," Jake said. Yeah, that's me," I said. Jake smiled wickedly and said, "Well, thanks for the ride, and thanks for this," he said, grabbing my car keys from his pocket. He then shot me in the chest and ran out of the store with the money and the backpack. He got into my car and drove away, leaving me bleeding on the floor. I felt a sharp pain in my chest and fell to the ground. I couldn't breathe or move. I saw blood pooling around me. I heard sirens in the distance. I knew I was dying. I thought of my wife and kids. I wished I could see them one last time. I wished I had never stopped for Jake. I wished I had never picked up the hitchhiker. I closed my eyes and I was driving home from work on a dark and stormy night. The rain was pouring down, making it hard to see the road ahead. I turned on the radio to keep myself awake, but all I could hear was static and some faint voices. I tried to change the station, but nothing worked. I was getting nervous. I had heard stories about this road, how people had seen strange things or disappeared without a trace. I didn't believe in ghosts or monsters, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw a pair of headlights behind me. They were getting closer and closer, as if they were chasing me. I sped up, hoping to lose them, but they matched my speed. I looked again and saw that the car was an old black sedan, with tinted windows and a broken taillight. Who was driving that car? Why were they following me? I tried to calm myself down, thinking that maybe they were just going in the same direction as me. Maybe they were just as scared as I was. But then, the car suddenly swerved to the left and passed me. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that they had given up. But then, I saw them stop in front of me, blocking my way. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. I crashed into them, feeling a jolt of pain and fear. I blacked out for a moment, then woke up to the sound of glass shattering and metal twisting. I looked around and saw that my car was totaled. The airbag had deployed, saving my life, but I was still bleeding from some cuts and bruises. I tried to open the door, but it was jammed. I looked at the other car and saw that it was empty. There was no driver, no passenger, no one. The car looked old and rusty, as if it had been abandoned for years. How was that possible? How did it move? How did it follow me? I felt a cold sweat on my forehead. I grabbed my phone and tried to call for help, but there was no signal. I was trapped in the middle of nowhere, with no one to help me. I heard a loud thud on the roof of my car. I looked up and saw a dark figure standing over me. It had long claws and sharp teeth, and glowing red eyes that stared into my soul. It let out a blood-curdling scream and smashed the window with its fist. I screamed too, as it reached for me with its